First, Paul Weller, the legendary frontman of The Jam, is taking legal action against his former accountants. The firm, Harris Trotter, ended a 30-year professional relationship after Mr. Weller publicly accused Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. The musician claims this was unlawful discrimination against his philosophical beliefs. He says speaking out about injustice is not censorship, it's a duty. Any damages from the case will go to humanitarian relief in Gaza. His lawyers warn this reflects a broader attempt to silence artists supporting Palestinian rights. The accounting firm has yet to comment. So, is this another example of cancel culture? And should you be forced to work for somebody if you're offended by what they think? To discuss this, I am joined by journalist Nicole Lampert and writer and commentator Jonathan Sacerdoti. Welcome to the show, both of you. There's a saying, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. Now we've got 3 Jews, so I'm not sure exactly how many opinions we're going to get out here. Also, this debate is a little bit more nuanced, I think, Nicole, because talking before the show, I think it's very hard to come up with a very strict, this is right, this is wrong. But what do you think about this accountancy firm saying we don't want to work with Mr. Weller anymore?
Well, I think, reading into it, firstly, a few months before they did all of this, that he asked them about whether any of their money was going to Israel. So presumably he would have cancelled them if it had been the other way around. And also this happened in March, but it's only just come out. And I think he wants to basically be made a martyr of this. He's seen what's happened with NICAT, he's been part of that, and he wants to appropriate victimhood himself. As to whether they should be allowed to cancel him, I think that in this case, it's not about cancel culture. He can go to any other accountancy firm in the world. But it's about people saying, we don't want to work with you and we're dealing with your money, and some of that money that he is earning is going to be going to a side that we don't agree with. So actually, in this case, having thought about it overnight since we talked yesterday, I'm for them. I think that
you're for it. Yeah. I mean, there is a difference, Jonathan, isn't there, between a service, an essential service, and there's something like Nigel Farage, he being debanked, and in this case, an accountancy firm. There are many other accountants out there, right?
That's right. I mean, when I thought about this, on the one hand, I instinctively thought it was wrong for somebody to be denied a service for their political opinions, however stupid or misguided they might be. And on the other hand, I think it's probably the right of an independent company to decide who it does business with. And so I am a bit torn. I remember those cases where there were people trying to force cake companies run by religious Christians to make wedding cakes for gay people, and I was entirely against forcing those people to make those cakes. I felt it was sort of deliberately inflammatory and unnecessary, and that they had every right to turn down business for that reason. But then on the other hand, I thought, how would I think it would be if, say, any company turned down business from, say, a Muslim because they're Muslim, or a Jew because they're Jewish, and of course I would think that's entirely wrong. So I don't know really quite where to draw the lines on this one. And in this case, I don't think it's the same as a religion or an ethnicity, as Judaism is, as well as a religion, unlike Islam. But I do think that in this case, as Nicole said, it was clear that he also was concerned about what they did with their partners' charitable money, whether they were giving money to any Israeli causes. And indeed, the text message conversation that was reported in the Times indicated that actually Paul Weller said, fine, let's leave it there. And there was apparently an agreement that they didn't really want his business because he kept calling it a genocide that was going on in Gaza, and they made it clear to him that they didn't feel that was correct. And he said, well, in that case, I don't want to do business with you. So at that point, it seemed that actually they had agreement over that, and that since then, he's decided to lawyer up and take this to court. And I think in the letter of the lawyer, the quote said that this was part of his philosophical belief, that he had this non-negotiable belief that there was a genocide going on in Gaza. Now, that's peculiar because I don't think that it is a philosophical belief, or indeed non-negotiable, because either there is a genocide or there isn't a genocide, and that's a question of fact. I could have a non-negotiable belief that Paul Weller is genocidal. I would be wrong in that case, as far as I'm aware. So I think it's a strange thing to say that that is a non-negotiable philosophical belief that should be protected by the law.
Yeah, because we saw a case where Maya Forstater, she took her old employers to court because her belief that there are only men and women, that there are just 2 sexes, that was then protected as as a belief deserving of respect. So it'll be interesting to hear if this sets a precedent in any way that there's a difference between having an opinion of something and then having it as a protected belief.
Yeah, I think I'm really pleased that Maya Fasasa won her case, because it would be absolutely mental if she hadn't, and she didn't originally. But the idea that you can believe that you cannot change sex, you might decide you're a different gender, and you might ask people to call you that, but that does not mean that you change gender. And similarly, we've also seen off the back of that, we've seen a court case involving a professor at Bristol University who is a big anti-Zionist and an inflammatory anti-Zionist, and he was teaching anti-Zionist material at school at his university. And he also won his court case because of this idea of protected belief. And as a result, anti-Zionism itself is a protective belief. And as a result of that, then Zionism is a protective belief too. But yes, the idea of whether thinking that is any thought possibly a protective belief, as Jonathan said, impossible to say. And is it necessary to go to court to demand this when he didn't want to work with them, they didn't want to work with him, and as I think this is mainly about him trying to become a martyr, like Kneecap.
It certainly reads the statement like he's somehow victimised here. But we have seen it both ways. And when you see it the other way, there was a barber I believe it was in America, where she heard an accent and said, "Where are you from?" And he said he's from Israel, and she refused to cut his hair. So that's refusing your services, but that's slightly different, because that arguably is bigotry, because she is basing her belief system on just the fact that this person is Israeli or Jewish, not as to what they necessarily think, even though the majority of Jews are Zionists, right?
Right, but I also think it would be strange, even if we drew the line there, to say that you have to do a questionnaire before you have your hair cut or before you go to an accountant because you're Israeli or not Israeli, whether you're a Zionist or not a Zionist, if you think it's a genocide or not a genocide, if you want a penis-shaped cake for your wedding, or if you want to have banking but you happen to lead a right...
By the way, it was a delicious cake. Just want to say...
I just think that, in general, I err on the side of saying, let's just do business with one another. Let's not ask too many questions about each other's beliefs that have nothing to do with what the business we're engaging with. And on the other hand, I can also completely understand that somebody might be very uncomfortable. Harris Trotter, predominantly Jewish firm, as I understand it, they felt very strongly that somebody who was out in public so passionately saying that this was a genocide, they felt that this had a knock-on effect on Jews, both in the land of Israel, the Jewish state, and also outside in the Jewish diaspora. And I think they found that very difficult dealing with his business. But they'd been dealing with his business for something like 30 years. And I don't suppose his views are particularly new on this topic. So maybe they'd been managing all that time. It's really complicated and difficult. I just wish that they could have had a polite conversation with one another and agreed maybe we're no longer suited to working together. And that would have been a more grown-up way of dealing with it.
That is a very interesting idea, because trying to come to some kind of where the lines are in all of this conversation of cancellation, I was wondering if genuinely part of the solution might be you can refuse to use someone's services or refuse to give your own services across, but you should be forced to have like a 30-minute conversation and try and persuade the other side as to your argument or not. That, I mean, look, I'm not saying that that's...
It's not free speech, that's forced speech.
Yeah. Well, no, it's forcing them to have forced debate. I guess it's forced speech there, that you have to then at least be given the opportunity to explain why it is that you think what it is. Because, of course, so much of the time, people it's not what someone actually says, but what someone is being perceived to be saying. Yeah. So I'm not saying that that's in any way realistic of happening, but it's unfortunate that that isn't where we can't move to as a culture.
I think that one of the things that is probably quite hard to understand for a non-Jewish person is how painful it is when someone like Paul Weller is standing up for a group like Kneecap, which he's made a big deal out of, when they have been on stage allegedly saying up Hamas, up Hezbollah. So up the people that murdered all of these people in Israel. And I think that is one of the things. So if you were like French people in a firm and you were calling the France genocidal, then they would be upset too. And it's harder to explain we're British Jews, and they're probably British Jews too, but how closely connected the Jewish state, the Jewish nation has been, and how difficult it's been in the last couple of years since October 7, and how things have got worse and worse.
Well, you're seeing a swastika drawn today outside a Jewish man's house in Bournemouth.
Yeah, outside a rabbi's house. And every day there are different things, and that's, I think that's one of the problems. If that person seems to be not just having a belief, but actually to be having a belief that is on the side of the people that want to kill you, on the people, you know, I would say that Hamas are genocidal, and they've been quite open about their desire to kill all Jews. And although I'm not saying that Paul Weller is necessarily on the side of Hamas, his wife has certainly done some Instagram messages defending what they did. So I can see why they would feel personally upset and personally unable to deal with that in a way that kind of goes to your core.
Yeah.
And actually, I'll say, in addition to that, again, it's not about the legality of it or whether they should or shouldn't work with one another, but some of the things that I read the lawyers said were ridiculous. This, aside from this protected philosophical belief that it is definitely a genocide, there was also the idea of kneecap, that the support for kneecap was such that he said they were being deplatformed and silenced. Now, they've certainly not been silenced. I'd never heard of them until this, and I've heard a lot about them and their
Well,
views.
there's this sort of Barbara Streisand effect,
right,
or whatever.
And the point is, though, that anti-Israel and even anti-Jewish views are far from deplatformed and silenced. They're all over the place, all around the world. They're mainstream now. So, in fact, I would say that standing up for kneecap really, for me, reveals part of the problem with a lot of the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel campaign groups' line of logic, because you can be in favour of protecting Palestinian people, even Palestinian nationhood, if you believe in that, without supporting people who are literally charged with or in court for allegedly showing support for terrorist groups, waving Hezbollah flags, outwardly expressing support for terrorist groups. And I think that's what really shows the truth.
Well, I think there's hypocrisy, and I guess the fear is being hypocritical yourself on this issue. But thank you very much. I'm going to read, Paul Weller has got a statement here. Silencing those who speak the truth is not just censorship, it's complicity. I'm taking legal action, not just myself, but to help ensure that others who are not similarly punished for expressing their beliefs about the rights of the Palestinian people.